Okay, so our final project for this course is the sexual sex abuse surrounding the U.S. gymnastic team. Um, this is the summary that we'll provide. Steve Penny, Larry Nasser, the U.S. gymnastic, Marisa, and and took place after the Olympics in Rio in 2016. So just to give an overview, Steve Penny was the president of U.S. Gymnastics, who protect, you know, over coaches over the kids' allegations regarding the sexual abuse allegations by Larry Nasser, who was the doctor, the U.S. gymnastic doctor, and also a doctor for the Michigan State University. So the 29 years of of his work at the U.S. Gymnastics, he was a lot of sexual allegations going on, and Marisa was the one who really took in depth on that to trying to investigate what was really going on inside of U.S. gymnastics. So one of the things that we did, we found that issues, the main issues, ethical issues, which is this gymnastic had a histories of abuse allegations. It was reported then 54 sexual abuse complaints, but the FBI did nothing about it. And this led on to Larry Nasser abusing more than 200 female athletes, which were sexual abuse under the guidance of medical treatment uh, by Larry. So we found the key administrator for the athletic dilemma, which was the Steve and both coaches that took a real part in this case. So one of the decisions for Steve Penny was dismissing the complaints unless they were signed by the victims. The U.S. Gymnastic protected again the coaches by failing the report allegations. And then the Caroline, for instance, had that control over not allowing, no one at the ranch facility. So we provide in our organizational culture, we provide some levels of awareness, which we found the mission and the organization values to fall into these five values, which is the safety, integrity, and accountability, transparency, and listening. And the artifacts of this, the U.S. gymnastic, the ability to win so many gold medals. And we believe that these elements play a real role in this crisis. Why? Because, it's a dollar value. Do you win? The more you win, the more sponsorships, and then they fail to take care of the well-being of these young athletes, which at the time, like leading to those gold medals, they were telling and reporting that were being touched importantly, but nothing was done by and the Steve Penny had the big impact of hiring and big impact and power of hiring the FBI private investigation, and that's led to the toxic organization. We pulled up some quotations from Maggie's parents, Maggie's mother, which was one of the athletes who represent the U.S. gymnastic, and the Rachel as well. It was just a former athlete that describing how toxic environment was, the U.S. gymnastic, and all was about intimidation, silence, and fear. So if we will do a quick reflection, this does not fall into the exposed versus experience what they claim to be, because obviously those values they believe they are important, supposedly to be important for the organization, they did not, comply with the experience. So what they said was not actually being put into practice. So now we go over to legal evaluations.
So for the legal evaluation, these are the employment laws that they have now picked up on since this case has come out. So this is all from the USA Gymnastics website. For starters, the board of directors are required to complete safe sport training which is essentially abuse training. In a statement they made, they said that the USA Gymnastics has taken steps to broaden the skill set of the board, increase the number of independent board members, and diversify perspective and independent board decision making. So, in doing so, they cut down their members from 20 to 15, and 8 out of the 15 are unaffiliated members. So, they are not really into the gymnastics, the centerpiece of it. And the directors may only serve 2 4-year terms, so that's an 8-year max. And now they now require background checks for all employees, which includes full-time to like volunteer employees. And just yesterday, after a settlement was reached with the survivors, as part of the settlement, USA Gymnastics and the Olympic Committee also agreed to designate some of their board seats to the survivors that came out and talked about their experience. So, USA Gymnastics responsibility to promote and develop gymnastics on the grassroots and national levels, to have a safe, empowered, and positive training environment. They are supposed to serve as a resource center for members, clubs, fans, and gymnasts throughout the United States, and they must provide continuing education resources for new and experienced members, coaches, instructors, and professional members. So, did the USA Gymnastics meet these standards? No, obviously they did not. They failed to meet these standards. That also hindered the athletes and the whole entire USA Gymnastics community. So, for the organizational communication, the prior communication, there was none. Nassar and the other coaches they hired Nassar without looking into his previous cases that were built against him. The accusations that were made against him were dropped, but they did not do any background check or look too deeply into what his background existed. During the case, Steve Penny made statements ensuring that he had no prior knowledge of sexual abuse allegations against Nassar, nor was he ever trying to cover them up, even though today he is charged with a felony for tampering with evidence. And then communication after the case. USA government appointed a new president and CEO. That's Miss Lily Lung. Her statement after Larry Nassar was sentenced, she says, "I will not waver on my commitment to focus each and every day on our organization's highest priority, the safety, health, and well-being for all of our athletes. We will create a culture that empowers and supports them." So for the media and public response, of course, there was an outstanding amount of support for each and every one of these survivors. But these quotes that I included here and the screenshots just show how much the public backed these girls as they shared the most vulnerable details about their childhood and early adulthood with the world. And you can see the support on all social media outlets and even having their own documentary on Netflix, that many people showed support for these strong women. I thought the picture of the rock in the bottom right-hand corner was really interesting because Larry Nassar had worked at Michigan State where some of the allegations were found, and that rock was created by students who wrote all the survivors' names on the rock, and they painted it. So I thought that was cool that they honored them. And then the top right is just a quote, like it's just a tweet that I saw on Twitter. Bottom left is just a quote from an article. And then on the right, I have a clip of Randy Margraves. He's a father of 3 survivors of the sexual abuse from Larry Nassar. He, in the video will show it, but he jumps across the table during a hearing and asks the judge for just 5 minutes with Larry Nassar. Truly shows his emotion and how he felt about the instances that occurred with his daughters. And of course, after this came out, social media flooded in support of Randy for his attempt to bite Nassar. So we can watch this quick.
You saw in a courtroom, we don't use profanity, but if you have some words that you would like to say, I would like to give you the opportunity to say them.
I would ask you to, as part of the sentencing, to grant me 5 minutes in a locked room with this demon.
I have
Would
a
you
feeling.
do that?
That is not how
Yes or
our.
no?
No, sir, I can't.
Would you
do
give me
that.
1 minute?
I, you know that I can't do that. That's not how our legal system.
Well, I'm gonna have to get stuff on. I want that stuff. I know. Give me 1 minute when I. What if this happened? You guys.
Not be like that. No one can behave like this. I want to make sure it's crystal clear. I'm sure my point.
You haven't lunch to a lady.
You cannot behave like this.
Yeah, that was a really good one. What if it? And then I think, Cheyenne, this video was really good because you're like, it's like, what if it was with you? What if it was with your kid? What would I have done? So sometimes we can't go into,
Just drop.
I love this video.
Just.
Okay.
Okay, and then we're going to look into the leadership assessment with USA Gymnastics. And here are the three main organizational leaders. Obviously, you have Dr. Larry Nassar, who is the head of the Dragon, causing all these issues. And he was someone who these young female athletes and their parents trusted because USA Gymnastics has always been one of the best sport programs in the world. So obviously, you think you have a good doctor. Then you have President Steve Penny, who kind of brushed everything underneath the rug and really only wanted to focus on the success instead of the mental and physical well-being of the athletes. And then you have Martha and Bella Caroli, who were the coaches of the USA Gymnastics, they were the face of this organization, and they're the owners of the ranch where these young girls were just dropped off, and essentially no one really knew what was going behind those closed doors. And all these leaders use the same kind of leadership style, which is the authoritarian, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it right, leadership style. So now we're going to dive more deep into that. So it's basically leaders just having total control over everything and not allowing any of the members being involved with any of the decision making or really anything basically. So both the president and the coaches have total control over the decision making process. They're protecting Larry Nassar and other coaches who had multiple warning signs of the sexual misconduct, and not allowing parents at the Crowley Ranch Facility Center. And I'm pretty sure that the children weren't really even able to contact their parents while they were there. And inheriting an executive policy of dismissing any complaints. I'm pretty sure in the main building in Indianapolis, there was a whole case of 50 plus complaints that were just put into a drawer. And then as a result of this ineffective leadership, it's just very self-centered and they're prioritizing their own interest in money. It's very poor communication. Clearly, there is no communication between the athletes and the leadership. It allows Dr. Nassar for at least 14 years to continue doing his medical treatment as well as the horrific things. Just an overall unethical conduct and psychological damages that these athletes are going to have to deal with for the rest of their lives. And then we decided to use the rational decision-making process model here and comparing how USA Gymnastics went about their decisions. So the 4 steps are identifying the problem, gathering information to understand why the decision is necessary, possible courses of actions, what we know and what we need to know, and then in the end, calculation the success of each alternative. So obviously the problem here is the sex abuse allegations throughout this organization. There was an in-depth investigation by the Indianapolis Star, which is really what brought this issue to the media and the public, and it wasn't USA Gymnastics themselves. The next step is 265 plus young athletes were sexually assaulted under the guise of the medical treatment. And there was over 37,000 child pornography images. And then in the end, it resulted in Larry Nassar being fired and serving 175 years in prison. And then when looking at the decision making and organizational change throughout this, there was very few appropriate decisions. There was more so problematic ones. And if you look at these appropriate ones, you can tell that it wasn't USH Gymnastics really making the decision to do this. Instead, it was outside forces forcing them to. So the first one is firing Larry Nassar from USA Gymnastics in Michigan State, then resulting him going to prison. And then as yesterday, the survivors just ended with a settlement of $38 million. And then, of course, arresting and resigning Steve Penny. Then the problematic decisions, which are for the most part all of them, Martha and Bella Crowley not being held accountable. You see the two other leaders in this organization being punished and whatnot, but these two clearly didn't have any punishment. USA Gymnastics never investigated whether Olympic gold medalist Simone Biles. No one really came to her and ever asked her about the situation. If she didn't step forward and come out of her just stepping out of her comfort zone, no one would have ever known about this. And she's one of the best athletes in this country and world. And for someone not to care about an athlete like that just shows you the culture here. Michigan State received a report from an athlete back in 1997. So if something was done about that, this might have never happened. And then FBI investigators who worked under the service of Larry Nassar, it just seemed like there was not really for the girls, it was more so for the leadership, and nothing was really done. And then now we're seeing organizational level changes. There's now a whole new executive leadership team, and something interesting about that is it's all made up of women, and their driving decisions are adopting recommendations, whether that be training to combat sexual abuse, process for filing misconduct reports, recruiting and hiring processes, and having just a better overall background check and reinforcement for all the candidates. Now on something interesting with their board, they're now having 33% of athlete representation on all the boards and committees. So now instead of it just being the leadership and the athletes down below, they're basically at the same level and they can provide their input. There's now the Athlete Bill of Rights. There's a platform to anonymously report anything, and they use an independent organization called Safe Sport. And what that organization does is essentially responds to reports of sexual abuse. And then for resistance of change, there really wasn't going to be any change within the organization until the Indy Star forced the changes and did their investigation. And since the investigation and change in leadership, there's only been positive change, and you can tell that this organization is moving down the right path. And they wanted change for years, and it's finally happening, which is good.
So we came up with few recommendations regarding this case, which is the first one would be the implementation of interpretive approach is allowing important rules to be based on social issues and fundamental outside resources. So in order to understand the real in-depth of the social issues, we must, focus on other, resources that help us implement, a better view and better rules within the organization. It's like becoming more open about involving other, spectrums of in the decision making. We came up with the CRR, program, which is the inclusive mindset programs. We found very important because we are leading with young athletes. This young athlete can be as young as 8 years old. So these mindset programs, it's allowed them to educate and found the resources to understand what is wrong and what is right about particular practice, So, and it's also about engaging in difficult conversations in order to educate them about, um, different things that could be accepted by a coach or any employee. So, and next go into the 2 3 months anonymous report system and feedback shared with external entities. One of the reasons we decided to do that is because obviously Steve Penny has this power of controlling everything and choosing who to investigate. So allowing these anonymous reports not only help with athletes coming forward and report, because at this particular age you have no power to, you don't know, you don't have any knowledge, the power of, when you report, and maybe in most cases at the beginning they weren't even believe. Anonymous and consistent system reports allow to, identify these issues on a daily, routine. An extensive background prior to the hire process. Why? Because, as you know, U.S. gymnastic has an history of, hiring coaches who had, uh, related, like, I would say, like, problems related with, abuse or misconduct or anything that would allow to literally take the time to select the right people for the role.
And then more recommendations, having a child protection requirement. Employees are not allowed to provide any medical treatment outside of work. And with USA Gymnastics, there was evidence that athletes went to Nasser's home, his own room, stuff like that. Certified abuse training. So I think, as well as, like, you always hear about certified CPR trained, that's another great thing that should be added. Athlete safety first, allowing report complaints to be filed without athletes or parents' signatures. A lot of these athletes are considered minors, so therefore they need someone to sign the complaint for them. So not allowing a signature would be great, and more girls could report anything. Indianapolis Star conducting an investigation on U.S. men's gymnastics team, because there have been some things brought up about the men's team. So seeing if there can be an investigation with that, that'd be great. And then inclusiveness, just having the parents be more involved, because they used to just drop those girls off at the ranch and really knew nothing what was going on.
And then lastly, just the lessons in organizational communication. They need to understand the well-being of athletes comes before their success, is what they majorly failed at during this whole case. They need to recognize the authoritarian leadership implications and engage in effective communication. So we broke it down to upward communication, where athletes, volunteers, and coaches should have all the same playing field and responsibilities. And lateral communication, the CSR inclusive mindset program from different departments, which the men's and women's gymnastics, and the external communication, which is the social media, the awareness on child abuse and sports campaigns all throughout social media. And the lessons in organizational leadership, so definitely involving more women in leadership roles. So this is important. This is the most important aspect of this. As they hired their new female president, just shows how important having females in leadership positions are. The women can understand more about the female athletes who are actually partaking in the sport, and they can also feel more comfortable to come forward when things occur like this case. And then they need to fully understand the stakeholders' experiences, which are the athletes.
Yeah. So the main question here that we give you guys is, like, what if, like in the play, like Shan playing the video and the guy, one of the parents, the main question is, what if was with you, or what if was with your sibling? What kind of approach would you take, and then also, like, in the future, how are we going to do better? And now leads on to us, once we graduate and we go into, work in sports organizations, is about, like, how are we going to handle these things and live our lives to the best and protective in a safe environment place. So yes, this is our end of our presentation. We hope that you like it, and thank you so much.